Do you realize that the gospel that we just heard is a story that has been around for some 2,000 years now? And here we are in America, hearing that gospel, and we are still astounded by it. Why? Because this gospel tells us why we are Christians. And this gospel also tells us that Jesus captivated people in his own day, and he has been captivating people all the way to our own time. The outline of the story is very straightforward. Jesus is asked by a synagogue official to go with him to his house because his daughter is very ill. He was an important man, that synagogue official. And on the way to that official's house, an unimportant lady comes along. In fact, we know the synagogue official's name was Jairus. This lady, we don't know her name. And she touched Jesus' garment, and she was healed. We find that we are moved by that account, and people have been moved all these years. What does it tell us? This gospel passage gives us 5 good reasons why I am a Christian and why you are a Christian. The first one is this: Jesus had time for unimportant people. He was in the company of that powerful man, Jairus. But while he was on the way to Jairus' house, an unimportant lady comes along. We don't know her name. But Jesus stops. He puts aside the important person, has him wait, and he takes care of the lady. This gives me hope that Jesus has time for me. This gospel also tells us that Jesus had time for people who were suffering great losses. This woman, she was poor. She had lost blood. She had lost her lease on life. She had been treated painfully at the hands of many doctors till she ran out of money. So she gave up on them, and they probably had given up on her. And there she was with all of her losses on the sidelines of life. But because she was on the sidelines of life, Jesus noticed her and helped her. And this raises my hope that Jesus notices me too. Jesus also treated her with affirmation. The woman who had no name, Jesus wanted to meet. Lord, with all the press of the crowd, come here. He wanted to see her face, and he wanted to call her by name. This raises my hope that when people criticize me, when they laugh at me or ridicule me, they may not be right. But Jesus is right when he comes to me and wants to fill me with life and tells me that I'm not as dead as other people think I am. This gospel passage also teaches us a great truth, that Jesus came to this world to raise the dead. The only qualification to receive the message of the gospel is you've got to be dead. What do we learn from this gospel? We learn who Jesus is and why we are believers, why we are Christians, and why we are here in His church, in His family. He has time for us when we feel unimportant, when we suffer our losses, when we need affirmation, when we're surrounded by negativity and personal criticism, and even when we are dead, whether spiritually or physically, we are qualified as candidates for Jesus' concern. There was an interview on television news that sounds very much like the lessons of today's gospel. A mother had raised a family, a large family, single-handedly. And she was being asked about that. And she went through some really tough times. There were disappointments and discouragements and setbacks and challenges. But the interviewer was quite impressed with her and wanted to know what her secret was, and suggested to this mother, I'll bet what you did is you loved your children equally. And she said, no, I didn't. I loved my children, but not equally. I loved the one the most who was down and needed to be built up. I loved the one the most who was hurting and needed to be healed. I loved the one the most that was weak and needed to become strong. I loved the one the most who was lost and needed to be found. Amen to that mother. Amen to Jesus. Because that's why we are Christians, and that is why we are here.